All right. So we're here today with Air Force veteran Brandon Waithe. He spent 20 years, 29 days in the Air Force, finished up as a master sergeant. Brandon is going to talk about his transition. This is kind of recent for Brandon that he retired from the Air Force. So I'm going to give the floor to you, Brandon. Tell
Yeah,
us what's
thanks.
going on.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, I retired from the Air Force like almost a year and a half ago, which is it's weird to feel that I'm almost fully transitioned in the sense of like I'm starting the memories about military acronyms and stuff are starting to fade, and I'm starting to forget specific phrases and stuff. So I'm starting
Oh,
to feel
no.
like a real civilian almost somewhat. Yeah, appreciate the intro. I'm really emphasized the 29 days thing because I was ready to go, and that's something that like some of like my friends are still in, a couple of them are chiefs, and they are just kind of like when I was retiring, they're like, please let me know how it goes and keep in touch, man. I'm like, yeah, of course we keep in touch. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, I'm just kind of scared, man. And I was like, is that why you're staying in till for 30 years? Like, dude, get out. But there's some people that when it comes to like the transition to retire, they're like, I'm comfortable here. I'm gonna stay when they're really not happy anymore, but they're just like, I don't know, I don't want to have to do all the effort to retire and get out. So yeah, that's why I like to bring up the 29 days thing. It was a funny bit for me to remember the exact days.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it is tough. It's a scary time. 30 years would be comfortable maybe
Yeah.
for a lot of people, but I think that could be painful too, right?
Right. Yeah. Like my friend, one of my friends, he's a chief and he was at 20 something years. And once he made chief, he was like, well, I'll stay in a little longer. And then he was like, I'm staying a little longer. And I'm like, man, you're almost 25. Like, get out. Yeah. So yeah, the comfortability factor and the fear. I used to think it was silly, but then when it got closer, the panic started to set in of like, oh, what am I gonna do, man? Like for real, like I have to figure this out. So yeah, it's a daunting thing, and that's why I was happy to come on the podcast because I just kind of share my experiences with transition and some of the pitfalls or some of the lessons learned that I had. Because a lot of times you get bombarded with all this information when you get out, or when you get out, or you retire, you go to TAPS, you do that stuff. But when it comes to like real life, like what's happening for you, it's different for everybody. And there's
Right.
like a lot of key things that we're going to talk about later, like you're saying, that really helped me, specifically going to the private sector.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about, I guess, the last year and a half, how
Man,
that's been going.
yeah, it was. So I retired, and I was in a staff gig when I got out. So I had a job at our group, which for the Air Force, it's like there's several squadrons underneath the group, and I was the chief of training. So when I retired, I was like, well, I'm already into training, and I love learning and development stuff. Whether it's creating curriculum or instructing and facilitating. So I was like, I'll just do that. I mean, so when I started looking for jobs in that arena, it was really tough trying to translate what I wanted to do. And so, I did the skill bridge thing, got a skill bridge internship with Sherman Williams. And I did the skill bridge thing through hiring our heroes, which if
Okay.
there's anybody out there transitioning out of the military, definitely find one of those service programs like hiring our heroes or hire military. I'm partial into hiring our heroes because they were amazing. Because what they do is they like assign a program manager to you and a group of people in a cohort, and then they kind of guide you through the process of finding your interviewing with companies, resume building, what you're supposed to wear, which is something that really threw me off. Because at first I was like, I know how to dress, but then I was like, wait, for an interview, do I wear this or this? And now I'm all not understanding all the nuances and learning that bit. How do people tell you talk to people is completely different. I thought that I was the most non-military military guy. Like Air Force, obviously it's Air Force, and I mean, we're supposed to be like, the least military of the branches. And then I was in special operations, which is even less military because we're all like flying around in civilian clothes and doing things. So, but yeah, I was really surprised at how, like, when I'm like talking to my mentor and stuff, and the hiring our heroes thing, she was like, "Ooh, you're a little stiff here. Don't use that term. That's military." And it didn't realize how much it had just seeped into my life. So yeah,
That's
it was
interesting.
hiring our heroes was really helpful for that. So then I got the internship with Sherwin-Williams, and then from there, I actually let me roll back. So one of the things
Sure.
I did was when I got close to the transition point, when I was like, I know I'm retiring soon, I got a year out. I reached out to friends that I knew that were civilians. Either they were former military or weren't military at all. So like my friend Chad, he was a vice president at Saffron. He still is vice president of HR at Saffron. And I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm thinking about HR because I just went on, there's this website the Department of Labor has where you like look up careers and jobs you can do that are related to your, for me, a AFSC, Navy rate, Army MOS. But they were always way off, way off. Like for a tactical systems operator, which, I did signals intelligence, they were like recommending I be a detective or a security guard. And then
Oh
at
my
one point it
goodness.
was like, uh, radio operator. And I was like, this isn't the 30s. There's no radio
So
operators.
they were recommending things to you. They weren't saying, "Hey, what would you like to do?" They were
Yeah,
saying, "This is what we think you should do."
right. And to be fair, it's a website that kind of like takes
Hmm.
your AF, your job code, and then
Got
tries
it.
to match it up with things. But
So
the
it
matching
was
up,
just using logic, just to say, based
yeah,
on your experiences, these are some good fits.
yeah. But I think the logic they've used was really bad because there were some jobs that didn't make any sense. They were recommended for. So, anyways, I'm looking through that, and I started to figure out, oh, you know what? Training and development is a part of the human resources umbrella of that family of jobs. And so I reached out to Chad because he was a human resources guy, and I was like, hey, what should I do? He's like, well, describe to me what you're doing. And I was like, well, I was a mass sergeant. I'm chief of training, so I'm in charge of training for all these squadrons, 400 people. You know, setting the goals and strategies for what they're doing as far as training and goals. And he was like, that's what I do right now as a vice president. And it struck me like how I don't know, undervalued we are in the military, especially, the enlisted side, where it's kind of like, oh, he doesn't have a degree, but you're like for me, I was sitting in a position that was supposed to be for a major. So I was running not only our tactics, but also the training side. So it was one of those things where it kind of hit me like how much like experience and like soft skill and hard skill like power enlisted airmen, sailors, marines, and soldiers have that we just don't recognize. You don't realize it until you start comparing it to like a civilian. So like, oh, I was the sole person you know uh, guiding where the aircraft would be going to prosecute terrorist targets,
Hmm.
and I was just an E5 at the time, or I was an E6 or E7. And when you take that and you compare it to you know the director of human resources at Nestle, and you're like, yeah, I've dealt with that before. I had airmen crying because their girlfriend was left them, or I had to like get my team to focus. After one of our guys crashed and died, we'd be like, hey, we got to focus and fly the next mission, kind of thing. Those
Wow.
kind of skills. It's once you start to but you have to figure out a way to translate it to civilians without scaring them, because that's what I found out. You can't you can't really share too many of your war stories with regular civilians because they start to feel either they get freaked out or they get a little it's not, I guess, inferiority complex, kind of, where you're like, well, crap, I can't do anything. I have nothing to say that compares to what this guy just said. So I'm just going to be like, thank you for your service in like 30 different iterations. And, so you don't want to make them feel inadequate. That's the word, inadequate. So you kind of make them feel inadequate if you bring up too many of your stories that are like too hard hitting. So I had to figure out a way to translate those words to say the same thing without being too powerful and then just, blowing the lid off of people. And one of the ways that helped was, talking to Chad. He's talking to me about that. I reached out to every friend that I knew that was civilians to like, hey, do you know anybody that's that was in the military that's getting out or it's been out, and started making those connections. And so that networking piece is huge. Like a lot of veterans want to just, at least the ones that I've interacted with, they want to get out and just like kind of walk into a new job. And it's like, no, man, it's really about who you know. And it, of course, it sucks and it's not great, but the more you network, the more opportunities pop up. And I thought it was, BS for the longest time. I was like, that sounds like nonsense. I just got to talk to a bunch of people and things will happen. But it is bizarre to me how civilians are just like, oh yeah, you know what? Actually, so and so has this thing, and you're like, oh, okay, that. And only because I know you that I'm getting this job now. Like that happened with me because I went to Tradeful and I'd been interviewing for that, but then I got laid off from that job. And in the 3 months that I'm waiting for a job, the one interview that I got that panned out was with Key Bank because I knew the HR recruiter from my SkillBridge experience. Like,
One dot connects to the
yeah,
other. I mean, it's yeah. The more you talk to people, the more you find out commonalities, and the more people are willing to help point you in the right direction, get you connected with somebody else, or give you an idea that you might not have thought about. Because when we get the blinders on, we are so focused in on what that next thing is ahead of us, and we might miss out on other opportunities. So it's great
yeah,
to bring other people in and network. I think it's just so powerful.
yeah. And then the LinkedIn piece was really helpful. I had Peg Glover was an amazing. She's an amazing person. She's got a. I'm gonna do a little spot for her because she's awesome. She's got a missiontransition.com as her website. She does executive coaching and just coaching in general for like veterans as her focus. But she reached out to me, and at the time, she wasn't really in LinkedIn a lot, and so she hit me up, and I thought it was a bot because she didn't have like a profile picture. But then she sent me out. She's like, "Hey, I'd like to help you out. I saw you were trying to move in the Northeast Ohio area," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, whatever." And then she like sends me a meeting request, and I was like, "Oh, this is a real person, salt of the earth human being, like really genuinely cares about people." And she was extremely helpful in helping me translate what I did and the impact of it into actual words. You know, I would be like, oh, I just, I just ran the tactics, organization and built lessons learned and stuff for our operations down range. And she's like, that's not nothing. Then she helped break it down into civilian terms and breaking it out. And then I was like, oh my God, I was a badass. Like, oh, that was really cool. We undersell ourselves so much as veterans because it's like everybody does tough stuff.
You were in the heart of a lot of heavy decisions within your group, and I mean, yeah, I guess if you do that a lot throughout the day and throughout the week and the month and the year that you're over the course of a deployment or while you're working, it just seems so normal. No,
Right.
not a big deal. And then when you go into civilian world, you're making all kinds of big decisions there too, and they're not nearly as big as, like you said, you were
Yeah.
telling aircrafts where to go to find. I think you said to find terrorists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Learn
that's
to
a big
high value
decision.
targets. Right. And you're just like, well, I mean, yeah, it was whatever to me. But then when she starts to talk to somebody else that's civilian about it, it really helps break it out. And that's one thing that I mean, TAPS tries, but they only have like a week, I think. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Like for you in the Navy, how long was your transition? Is it like a week long thing or the class?
So I feel like our transition was, I feel like 6 months, maybe even a year prior to getting out for me was was an opportunity for me to go, and we had a deployment coming up. So I had to
Oh
make
yeah.
sure that I got into the TAP program before a deployment came up, and I was able to start that process. So
That's
I
right.
don't recall doing a TAP right before I got out. I think it
Yeah.
was a year prior. I'm going to shift gears
Yeah.
and go back for a moment. We were talking about Skill Bridge, talking about hiring our heroes. I've heard some things about Skill Bridge that are good, bad. Sounds like overall the experience was pretty good for
Yeah.
you. But I think what I'd like to know a little bit about is when you went through the Skill Bridge program, what was that like for you to get the permission from your command to being able to go into a Skill Bridge program?
So I didn't have much of a problem at all. I think mainly because I was a fairly senior guy and I was up there. But even looking, down through the squadrons, I didn't see too many people getting denied. And this was the early times of it. So like 2000, 21, 22, it was, it was pretty big that the skill bridge thing was really blowing up. And I know that now, I've heard now some rumblings of commanders and stuff being a little bit more reticent about people getting to skill bridge too soon and too early because they were being able to do whatever. Like there was one of the airmen, he decided to go work at a in Napa Valley at a winery. And he's just gonna be a barrel guy. That's all he's gonna do. And I was like, sweet man, go for it.
That's awesome.
Do your damn thing. You know what I mean? Like hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
But some people were like not happy about it, and I was like, why are we worried about people transitioning out and what they're doing? And it's just one of those commanders get the sunken cost, or I don't know, if you're missing out. I don't know what's going on, but they're just like
Yeah.
worried about what if, and it's like, well, just plan better. I don't know. So yeah, that really starts to distress me because that's something that's really important for me to be able to go through skill bridge and see the civilian world and be an intern and be like, oh, you know what? This is what it's like. Not everything means somebody's going to die tomorrow. Like we can just, oh no, we didn't get that report done. Whoops. Like no one's going to die. That whole like intensity, like like my first week, my boss, she was the HR manager, caught me. Well, she didn't catch me, but she was like, why are you still online? It was like 6 o'clock. And I was like, oh, I was working on this thing. She's like, Brandon, this is Sherwin-Williams. This company makes paint. There's no reason for you to be online at 6 o'clock. She's like, go get off and relax. And I was like, and it struck me. I was like, oh man, like she's right. They make paint. But like the whole military career, you're just like careening downhill, like just go fast, 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 and then finally to like have a place to like slow down and get used to that was really helpful. I couldn't imagine. I don't know how my dad and my mom, when they got out of the army, were just like next day. They didn't even have transition. They're just like, cool, you're out, bye, man. And you just get out and go walk around and try to find a job. Like scares the crap out of me. I have no idea how they did that. Yeah, so
Man.
it really makes me nervous, or not nervous, but nervous for the future veterans if they take away skill bridge because that thing was super helpful.
Yeah, it's concerning. I don't know what that's going to look like if the force continues to get reduced, if they need to reduce the numbers of the military. It's hard. I hope they can keep it, and I hope that it can stay healthy. And I think the question needs to be not the what if we don't have enough bodies to do this thing, but it should be what if what if karma kicks me in the butt and I don't get to use skill bridge because I didn't let somebody else use it. I didn't
Exactly.
help them transition. And I think the senior leadership typically is in a better position when they transition. So it's not a big deal for them. The junior soldiers and sailors and airmen,
Yeah.
those are the ones that are going to have a harder time transitioning. They need a little bit more help. But really, ultimately, everybody that's a veteran deserves a good send off and the ability to get a head start in that civilian realm. So, yeah, hopefully they don't get rid of it. When you got through hiring our heroes, tell me about the experience that the hiring our heroes, counselors, and representatives had. From what I'm hearing about TAP, sometimes you can get people that got right out of the military. They go into the TAP program and they're instructing the TAP program
Oh
for a
my
lot of
God.
guys that are in the military still,
Yeah.
and they're not really experienced at all. So
Wow.
tell me about the experience from hiring our heroes.
I haven't heard that before. Well, I mean, I got lucky because at Herbert Field, our Airman Family Readiness Center is pretty stacked with like senior people that had been out for a while. But yeah, the Hiring Our Heroes
That's good.
program. Yeah. But I've heard like TAP varies depending on the base, which is really sad. But
Depends on who you get.
right. So Hiring Our Heroes was a great program because, and the experience was great because what they did, like the first day that you get, well, you apply for the program and you're more you're more likely going to get it. You have like this first day where you're like it's like it's like orientation, but it's more of like an interview where they Hiring Our Heroes interviews you to make sure that what they're doing is making sure that you're not crazy or in some kind of dire strait where you need better resources. So they
Good
tell you
point.
how to show up to dress and everything, be on time. And so if you're on time and you talk to them and you're dressed appropriately. They're like, cool, thumbs up. Because they'd had experiences I learned from my counselor where people would show up, sign up for the program, but then ghost it and just use that time to just do whatever they wanted. And so they were like, all right, we're going to try and tighten it up a bit. And it was good because they kind of set the expectation of what you're going to be doing, and kind of they give you some resources and just kind of walk you through everything. And so you're kind of prepped that, all right, this is really happening. And then that time where you're in the Heroes program, that month and a half, 2 months, where they have like a resume, they either have a resume day or different like professional development things throughout the weeks. And then the next month is the interview month, where they already have like, Desire Heroes is a Chamber of Commerce program, so they have like a ton of like corporate partners, like I don't know,
Mm.
like, it's got to be 100 something, and they give you the list of them, and they kind of try to tell you, they tell you which ones match up with what you're looking for, and then you just start applying and sending your resume out, and then they start reaching out to you, and you start interviewing with these different organizations to intern with. It's a really smooth and it's a great program. One thing that I didn't do that they told me to do was like the program is meant to where like they want to have at least 80% of the people that go through the program get hired by the partner. And the partner is
Okay.
supposed to come in with the intent of hiring. They don't have to hire the person, but they're supposed to have an intent after their internship is over to actually hire them for the job. For me with Sherwin-Williams, it was one great company, but what I did it, they had me do a little media spot for them saying, hey, veterans. And so they did a little interview, and I dressed up in a suit, showed up and interviewed about my military experience and how it translated to Sherwin Williams. And I think it was really good. And I thought it went great. But it was funny during the time I was talking to the videographer. He was like, so you're going to get a job with these guys, right? And I was like, I mean, it'd be awkward if I did this media spot and I didn't get a job. And then we laughed. I laughed, he laughed, and then I didn't get a job. At the end, the week at the end of my internship, my HR manager, she was like, "Listen, I've been struggling. I've been trying to find a position or get you a position, but there's nothing available, so we won't be able to offer you a job." And she's like, "I'm really embarrassed about this." And I was like, "I mean,
Mm.
hey, it happens." But there's a media spot out there of me saying how great it is to be with Sherwin Williams, and I never got a job with them. So it's pretty. I thought it
Well,
was hilarious.
I'm glad
Way
there's a
after the
media
time.
spot for you, and obviously, like you said, overall experience was good. You were able to get some, you were able to put something good on the resume. Big
Yeah,
company, well known company. I'm sure you probably could go back at any time if they had the right fit for you.
yeah. They reached
But
out to me
even
a couple of
so,
times.
there you go. So
Yeah.
that's which is actually a perfect segue to what's going on today. What what's the goal of what's the goal of Brandon's life right now? What are you trying to accomplish today?
So yeah, we talked about it a little bit before we even started recording. Was I am the great, I can't complain situation where I have retirement to cover me, and gives me time to pivot. So I just recently got laid off again, two in 1 year. I don't think it's a record, but I'm feeling pretty unique right now. But
It's
I
a
was working at KeyBank,
hard
and
situation.
yeah, and working at KeyBank, interest rates going up, and I was most recently hired on learning and development person. And when it comes to learning and development or training, just like in the military, the corporations are like, that's the easiest thing to cut. So
Mm.
I knew what was happening. So I, was doing my LinkedIn preparation and stuff, and they let me go. But they gave me a 6 month severance, which was amazing. So yeah, right now I'm just thinking about where I'm going to pivot. I've had a couple of so one of the things that I did when I got out was I thought the best way to network was to join trade associations that are in the fields that I'm interested in. So I joined the SHRM chapter, or Human Resources Association chapter of Akron, where I live locally. Excuse me. And then I joined the Association for Talent Development chapter, which is like a learning and development chapter, a trade association. So I joined those two chapters locally and started networking with people there. And I learned how many learning and development consultants there are out there. And I started to realize, like, as I'm doing learning and development in different companies are cutting this function of learning and development they cut it quite often. And a lot of times, either
Mm.
they're small and medium sized businesses, they don't have the resources or capacity to have a learning and development person organic to the organization. So I'm looking at consulting, in the sense of let me go to a small and medium sized organization company and help them build their training programs, and just so it's just kind of like it can run on its own for them, or come in and help their HR managers with it, or come and help their training development. And honestly, like when it comes to consulting, you're supposed to find a niche that you're most uniquely able to provide to the area that you're in. And so I'm still working on that. So I'm still kind of feeling that out. And in the meantime, I'm interviewing and looking for jobs. Still, I've got a job interview with the Akron Urban League next
Okay.
month, which is going to be in a director of education, which is right in the wheelhouse that I have. And one of the reasons that they probably called me back was because I have Urban League connections from doing a nonprofit thing called Diversity on Board. And so with that, again, networking, especially if you're trying to work in a local area. Now, when it comes to remote stuff, those of you guys, veterans out there trying to do remote, good luck, because it's kind of harder to network remotely unless you have a tie to that company, or you have something super impressive on your resume that takes you out.
It is hard.
Because more than likely
Yeah.
you'll be working with a remote company, or some of the remote stuff that you might get will be smaller organizations, and you'll be at a varying level of success with them. But I networked locally, and that's what got the interview with the Urban League. So yeah, I'm kind of in a space trying to figure out who Brandon wants to be when he grows up. The next version of Brandon growing up, I guess.
Yeah, I there's another gentleman that I interviewed recently who is about 60 years old and just said, "Yeah, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up." So I think that's the problem that we're always going to face is just we define ourselves and redefine ourselves, and we're always looking for whatever that next thing is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like a completely different shift from what we're currently doing, but it's what is that next thing that we're trying to achieve. And I think consulting for you would be awesome, man. I think that's a wonderful
Appreciate it.
approach. And have you thought about any of the niches that are you narrowing the niches down right now?
Well, I got laid off last week.
Okay, you haven't had a
So,
lot of time.
well, no, yeah, it's been it. But I will say that as far as where I'm looking at right now, I'm leaning towards um, like diversity, equity, inclusion kind of training,
Sure,
and just succession planning for companies and stuff like that. Because a lot of times, that's what I noticed when I was at the previous company that I was with, and the previous two companies I was with, was there are varying levels of ability out there for them to be like, all right, I want to inventory the skills of the organization and then silo them into like jobs, and then make sure all those jobs are all aiming towards the same goal for the company. You know, the startup that I was a part of, it was just kind of like all over the place. I tried to organize that a bit with them, but they had different challenges, to put it nicely. So
sure,
Key Bank was just a massive organization, but they were going through a lot of different changes, internally and externally, because they're trying to reorient themselves in the mortgage lending world changing, and interest rates being higher. So it's really our generation of millennials. Like we are like have been the most adaptable, resilient group of people ever. Because our parents, they would just get a job at the factory and they could work there for 30 years, no problem. Us, we're over here working, we're Ubering, then consulting on the side, and then doing a daytime job somewhere, and then maybe coaching soccer at night. Like it's like we have to like do a whole bunch of things to make the amount of money that they were making back in the 80s and 70s. So it's pretty funny.
yeah. I mean, our attention is, I think, our attention is stolen by so many
Yeah.
different things, so many more things than I think it was in the past.
Oh yeah.
There's just, like you said, time is. You've got soccer, you've got all these things happening around us on the internet with work. It is tough. It is tough to figure out how to prioritize everything. And well, I think that actually leads us to the next part of our conversation.
Yeah.
But if you think about a time in your life when you really needed advice, what time frame would you go back to and what would you tell yourself?
I would have went back to, man, and I wrote down like a couple of different ones.
That's,
And then I was still like, I can't pick one because I don't know, life is so wild, especially when you're younger. But I think I would have went back to the time when I was at DLI, Defense Language Institute, when I was there for Arabic, and I was going to be a linguist, and it was really tough time for me. Culture shock, you know, I had been homeschooled as a kid. My parents were super religious, and
wow.
then I joined the Air Force, and I realized the world's completely different. And then I was like, no offense to anybody that's religious, but I was like, this sucks, and I'm out. And I realized like there's a whole new world out there. But then I had a massive identity crisis because I don't know who I am anymore. My whole life and experience was like I was a Sunday school teacher and all that stuff, and then boom. So what I would go back to that person is to tell him that what was I wrote down? Oh, I'm gonna be that guy that looks at his notes.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
ignore
Notes are
like
good.
right. It was gonna be love yourself. You know, be comfortable with who you are because everyone else had a town they were from and all that, but I had been moving. My parents moved all the time, and I was I had no real like roots anywhere. So I would say to that person, love yourself and be comfortable with yourself. And then the other thing would be ignore the feedback. You know, because there's going to be a bunch of feedback about people trying to tell you what you think and should do. Just be true to yourself and just be try to be happy with what you are. And that's the tough part that I wish I could go back and that's what I'm working on now, honestly.
I'm working on that
And-
now. I mean,
right.
I think that's key is just trying to find that comfort in who you are, and we know what our compass is, and we know what we feel is the right thing to do, and it's
Yeah.
it's okay to just go ahead and do that.
Yep. Oh, and the third thing I would tell that person is there's not there's nothing wrong with getting some help. Because back in the time, early 2000s, the whole during the Afghanistan war, if you tried to go to mental health for anything as an
Mm.
aviator, and just talking from an aviation standpoint, because that's what I was in, I was a flyer. If you did any of that, there was ooh, you might not be able to fly anymore. And so we were like, I don't want to do that. And so you just like bear down and deal with whatever you're dealing with. Whereas now, it's a lot better for them, for the guys they're in now, way better. They've taught the mental health professionals how to like properly code people so they don't get disqualified from flying and ruin their careers. But then also like I got out and there's the vet centers, which a huge plug for them. The veteran centers in the areas are huge. Like that was a really big part of being able to transition and work on some mental health stuff getting out because that stuff's expensive. It's insanely expensive.
It
And the vet
is.
centers were huge for that. So that kind of segued away. But yeah, that's what I would tell
No,
myself
it's
because
perfect.
yeah,
Use the help and don't back down from it. Oh my gosh, I'm so anxious all the time, and usually it's related to work or it's
yeah,
usually career related stuff, and I bombard my wife with that stuff all day long. And
yeah.
it's like sometimes I feel like that's all I ever talk to her about. And then I realize, I could go to somebody else. I could talk to a counselor
Hmm.
about my anxiety and the
Yeah.
stresses that I have. And then when I talk to my wife, I can actually talk about other things. I can ask her how her day went instead of just bombarding her with how stressful my day was.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's take advantage of the help any way we can get it. I go to the VA all the time for this.
Yeah.
I've got a good counselor there, and there's so many other resources out there that if the VA is not for you, there's other places you can go that offer
Some,
free support to vets. So
yeah.
take advantage of it.
Yeah. 100%. And then, yeah. And one last shout out to my wife for being able to like handle all the stuff that I was going through because I tell you what, people told me that transitioning out of the military, it's going to be tough. Be careful, make sure you have a support system. I'm like, okay, yeah, man, I'm just leaving the military. It's not that serious. But the existential crisis that sinks in when you finally realize that really no one cares what you did, like they care in the sense that they're like, man, thumbs up, NFL flies some flags around and support the troops. But when it comes down to it, and they're looking at a job reform, and like, should I help this veteran out, or should I take this guy that's younger? I'm gonna take the guy that's younger. And veteran, thank you for your service. So the
Yeah,
that
that
realization is
certainly
setting
can
in.
happen. Yeah.
That realization is setting in, like, and having that support system around you to make sure you can handle it is really key, because I know plenty of guys that got out that didn't have a support system and realized that they couldn't just be like, hey, I'm a vet. I did this before. I know what I'm doing. People are like, that's not enough for me. I don't care. And they would get crushed, and then they'd have to like work through it. Me, last year was one of the toughest years of my life. But, with my wife, the Veteran Center, that support was awesome. But yeah, those of you guys that are getting out, you have to take advantage of those resources. Don't do the it's cool. I'll just tough it out and I'll just, have a couple of whiskeys and we'll be good. Like, don't do that.
That's certainly a route that a lot of people have gone down, and it doesn't end well.
Nope.
But shout out to all the military spouses out there,
Seriously.
current military and veterans.
Seriously.
We put our spouses through all kinds of heck and hell, and yeah, and to the vet centers and other resources that are out there that are helping us stay on the straight and narrow. So,
Yeah.
but Brandon, it's been a pleasure, man. Appreciate your time today and having this conversation.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. When you reached out to me to jump on here, I was like, I don't think I have anything to add to this, but I really appreciated it. And I hope I didn't talk too much and just like completely bulldoze the podcast. But I was excited to share because I want to try to help out as many veterans out there as possible, just like
I
you're
would
doing
say
right now, which is amazing.
you killed it, brother.
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
and I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, you certainly have something of value to share, and you just did it. And there's still a lot more. There's a lot more between those ears. Everybody's got something to share. So, be modest. It's cool. It's all good. But all right, sir.
All
Thanks for
right.
your
Thanks a
time.
lot, sir. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.